Today, there's been a key change regarding the global tropics hazards outlook forecast, where we do see that now we have a new area outlined for tropical cyclone development just to the north of the Caribbean islands between the days of August 23rd and August 29th. This wasn't here yesterday, so the fact that the Climate Prediction Center has detected that there could be a higher risk of tropical cyclone development a little bit further westward just to the north of the Caribbean islands definitely is more concerning, because of course if we were to see a tropical storm develop, then it'll be a lot closer to land compared to the area outlined in week 2, where if we were to see a tropical storm develop in this area, it'll be over the open Atlantic and not really, at least for that week, an imminent threat to land. But now the Climate Prediction Center is now having a higher amount of confidence we could see a tropical cyclone a little bit closer to land, which is definitely very concerning. This is of course based on the latest runs of some of the computer models, which have been suggesting that there should be a strong tropical wave moving in by next week that could have a possibility of developing. The European model has been leaning towards potentially developing a tropical storm in the very long-term future, but we still need to pay close attention to the forecast because of course a lot could change. But in this video, we're going to take a look at several factors, like I've been doing in my previous videos, that could determine if we'll see a tropical storm impact the Caribbean or not, or potentially in areas further beyond, such as the United States. I'll try to answer those questions in this video by taking a look at several different factors. Here's a look at the current tropical storm strike probability provided from the European model at this time, and we do see that this area would be the area that would have the highest possibility of a tropical cyclone developing. Of course, the chance is low right now, but you have to keep in mind that with any long-term forecast, the chance is typically low, so we could see a chance definitely rise over the next several days, especially if the European model continues its trend where it wants to continue to intensify this tropical wave coming off the West African coast. So I will lean towards a possibility of a tropical cyclone developing in this area to be a little bit higher than what the European model is currently forecasting. Take a look at the current water vapor imagery over the main development region. We do see that there is quite a bit of convective activity now coming off the West African coast, and this area of convective activity is expected to slow down thanks to a weak steering flow that's just to the north of it, and could supply our next potential tropical wave that's still well to the west to see in this map. But once this more powerful tropical wave comes off the West African coast, this area of moisture should converge with that other area of convective activity and create potentially an even stronger tropical wave and potential tropical storm as it continues to head further westward. But we do see not a ton of dry air, at least for the time being, but that's expected to change once this tropical wave moves through, because on the northern side there could be an influx of dry air, which hopefully should be enough to diminish the possibility of a tropical storm developing. That still has yet to be seen. So here's what the latest run of the European model is forecasting over the next several days, and there aren't many changes compared to yesterday. The European model is still expecting a high amount of moisture to move over the Caribbean islands. Expect maybe anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain through the Wednesday into early Thursday time frame, and even extending as far as Friday. But outside of that, no tropical cyclone development, at least for the Caribbean, is expected from this area of convective activity. There's just a little bit too much wind shear. However, it's a different story when we take a look at this area of convective activity right here. We do see that this convective activity coming off the West African coast is expected to move very slowly thanks to a weak steering flow. We do see that there's this trough that's creating a weakness and ridging right in between these two ridges right here, and that's going to create a very weak steering flow. And if we were to take a look at the sounding, you're going to see that the surface level winds are moving very slowly in comparison to the upper level winds, which means that this area of convective activity is expected to stay over the same area for quite some time, and that could be concerning because once this more powerful tropical wave I've been talking to you guys about approaches the Atlantic, it's going to have all this convective activity, all this moisture to enhance the lift even more than how much it has at this point, which would certainly raise the possibility of tropical cyclone development if we were to see enough lift surrounding this storm system. And we do see the European model develops a well-defined low pressure system by as early as a Sunday time frame. However, we still do see the good news is that the storm is rather lopsided, which will definitely play a role in preventing this storm from potentially rapidly intensifying, which is certainly good news. However, despite the dry air, the European model is still expecting this tropical wave to remain fairly powerful. And what becomes more concerning is that the European model eventually does expect a little bit more moisture to surround this storm, and this storm to potentially become slightly less lopsided. It's still very lopsided by the time we approach the very long-term future, where we do see a lot of dry air on the western side, which is certainly good news and definitely keeping it from developing into a strong tropical storm or hurricane by this point. However, with its millibar pressure hovering around 1,007 millibars, that certainly could be enough for this to be considered a tropical storm. And if we were to see this storm become a little bit more symmetrical, this storm could be much stronger. It really just all depends on how much dry air will be to the west of it. That still has yet to be seen, but what will determine it is how strong the northwesterly or northeasterly winds will be, because the stronger the northeasterly winds will be, the more stable air from the Saharan desert will move towards the main development region, and that'll be a key determinant in determining whether or not we're going to see a tropical storm develop out of this tropical wave. That still has yet to be seen. However, based on the fact that the European model has been persisting on this idea over the next several days, there's definitely not something to take very lightly anymore for the Caribbean islands. I'm definitely not saying prepare now, because it's still way too uncertain to say that this will develop into a tropical storm and impact you guys. Still way too far to say that, but it's definitely at least something to be aware of at this point, because when the European model persists like this, it may indicate that this isn't a fantasy storm type scenario, and that the European model has at least a decent amount of knowledge regarding what a tropical disturbance would do in these sort of conditions. And based on that, the European model is expecting borderline, if not something that's tropical storm status. So there's definitely something to be aware of in the Caribbean in the more long-term future as we approach the middle part of August. We're just gonna need to wait and see how the dry air builds, and that won't be the only factor we're gonna need to take a look at. We're also gonna need to take a look at the upper level winds over this storm system, which could be a problem if this storm wants to intensify, depending on the position of the upper level lows surrounding the storm system. So this is what the European model is forecasting when it comes to the amount of wind shear over the main development region, and it's very similar to what the European model has been stating over the past several days, where it expects it to be over a small area where the wind shear will be rather light, but just outside of it, the wind shear could be quite strong. But I do believe there is a possibility the wind shear could become even stronger, because we have another upper level low that's located over the Caribbean that could be able to steer the stronger upper level winds towards the center of circulation rather than just outside of it, which is what we see right here. We do see that there's a strong amount of upper level winds right over the Caribbean, and if this is able to intrude the center of circulation of this storm, that will definitely limit the possibility of this storm system developing. However, the European model is at least expecting the wind shear to be just slight enough for this to have a good possibility. And not only that, the strong upper level winds just outside of the center of circulation could enhance the storm's intensity, in fact, because that'll improve the outflow as well as the breathing of this storm to allow more lift to occur. And that's what we're seeing right here. The only inhibiting factor in the European model scenario is the amount of dry air. So definitely pay close attention to how strong the winds will be just off the West African coast, because that will determine the amount of dry air, which will determine the future of this tropical disturbance. So definitely keep that in mind. But I will say with confidence that at least some sort of more powerful area of convective activity should move into the Atlantic by early next week. Even the GFS model is agreeing with that. There's just disagreements regarding if we're going to see that area of convective activity develop into a tropical storm. Let me show you guys the GFS model's forecast right now. Similarly with the GFS model hasn't really changed its forecast compared to what it's been saying over the past several days, where it does expect an influx of convective activity to move into the main development region, but it expects the dry air to be a little bit too much and just fizzles this tropical disturbance out in the open Atlantic, not really having much of any opportunity to develop into tropical storm, mainly because the dry air is just too much over the main development region, and it moves a little bit too far south for the Coriolis effect to have as major of an impact. And the reason being is that this ridge is a lot stronger, and not only will that force the tropical disturbance to move a little bit too far south for the Coriolis effect to enhance its rotation and ultimately its convection, but it'll force more dry air to move further southward as well, because with a stronger ridge comes a stronger pressure gradient and stronger wind speed for to pull that Saharan dust further southward and fizzle out this area of convective activity. We're going to need to pay close attention to both scenarios, see which one will eventually cave into the other one, because that will definitely raise confidence with this forecast regarding the possibility of tropical storm Emily. However, like I said in my previous videos, the GFS model has been slightly less reliable than the European model, and along with the Climate Prediction Center forecasting at least the possibility of tropical cyclone development by next week, I would lean a little bit more to what the European model is suggesting at this point. But again, don't disregard the GFS model either, because it is still this still could easily happen. The dry air could maybe be a little bit too much for it to handle. So still a little bit too uncertain. I wish I could give you guys the answers right now, but over the next few days, it's going to be very difficult to exactly pinpoint what will happen until we see one of the computer models show a similar forecast to the other computer models, reliable computer models. So we're just going to need to wait and see when exactly that happens, and I'll keep you guys updated once that forecast becomes more certain. But based on what I'm seeing, I'll lean a little bit more to the European model and what the Climate Prediction Center is suggesting, where it does at least believe there is a possibility of tropical cyclone development. So for the Caribbean, at least be aware of this scenario. So these are what the ensemble members from the European model are forecasting at this time, and we do see quite a few of them do want to develop a well-defined low pressure system, and some do even take it to a tropical storm status in the slightly more long-term future. However, of course, based on what the Climate Prediction Center is stating, where it wants to bring a larger area where tropical cyclone development is more possible, we could easily see this strengthen more beyond the 240-hour mark. Still a little bit too uncertain to say, but with the Climate Prediction Center suggesting at least there's a chance as far west as the Bahamas, we definitely need to be aware of that possibility as well. So don't take this forecast alone as the end all be all of this storm, because we could easily see much more intensification beyond this point. Even a few of the GFS ensemble members do believe that there is a possibility that a well-defined low pressure system could develop into a tropical storm. It's definitely, the ensemble members are definitely far less confident in this and what the European model is forecasting, and don't bring this potential tropical cyclone much further than the middle of the main development region, and not really that close to the Caribbean islands. So the GFS model is definitely less confident, but it's at least acknowledging that there could be a higher level of convective activity by next week. So we're definitely going to need to wait and see which of these two ensemble members will be the more correct scenario over the next several days. So in general, for my forecast regarding the possibility of tropical storm Emily, the key difference we had today is that the Prediction Center is now at least acknowledging that there is a possibility of tropical cyclone development a little bit closer to the Bahamas and the United States than anticipated, which is definitely huge for the more long-term future headed into late August. So even a little bit further westward, you need to at least be aware of this possibility if you want to know, if you want to be prepared potentially in the more long-term future. But outside of that, it's still a little bit difficult to forecast what exactly will happen. The computer models are still having pretty large disagreements, especially regarding the strength of this tropical wave. So we're definitely going to need to wait and see how much dry air there is and the wind shear right over the main development region, because the dry air right now could be a little bit too much for this tropical wave to handle. But I'll keep you guys updated if we see any changes from the computer models. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.